Hi, this is Dan Whitney with the Whitney Law Firm in Towson, Maryland. Today we're going to talk about the issue of rental car companies renting cars to consumers when those cars are currently reported as stolen. So you might think to yourself, how could this happen? Does this even happen? Is it a thing? The short answer is yes, it does happen. It happens very often. And really, unless you read about an article in the news or it happens to you or a friend or a loved one, you may have no idea this is actually occurring. But it's actually a huge problem with very serious implications for the consumers who are affected by a rental car company's negligence. So usually what happens is this: somebody flies into BWI or another airport and they get a rental car and they go about their business. However, that can turn into a nightmare when the rental car that the company provides the consumer has actually previously been reported as stolen and then recovered, but then the rental car company never notifies law enforcement to say, hey, we just want to let you know that SUV we reported as stolen, it's been recovered, it's not stolen anymore, take it out of the database, we're just going to use it normally. What happens is when rental car companies, for whatever the reason, legitimate or not, end up reporting a car as stolen, that goes into a database that all law enforcement sees. And what happens is, because there are license plate readers and cameras everywhere, inevitably, a car that has been reported as stolen and the license plate has been reported as a stolen car, that will trip on the cameras or the license plate reader, notify law enforcement that this car has been reported as stolen, and then it gets pulled over. The problem occurs when a consumer is provided one of these vehicles that the rental car company has already reported as stolen. They've gotten it back, but they did not take the time, they did not follow their procedures to make sure that they, after they got it back, notified law enforcement, hey, this car is not stolen anymore, we've recovered it, you don't need to pull over anybody who's driving it. So what happens is when a consumer gets a car that's reported as stolen, it usually goes something like this, based on my experience representing people in cases like this. And for example, I'll just tell you about a case that we had in a case that was filed against Enterprise. So a family flew in to BWI from Texas, and they needed an SUV. So they got one from Enterprise. What happened is that after they rented the vehicle lawfully, of course, the family was traveling through the great state of Maryland on their way to go see some family up north. And what happened is they were driving along and they noticed a law enforcement vehicle beginning to tail them. And eventually, the law enforcement vehicle hit the lights, pulled them over. Long story short, treated the driver as if it was a felony traffic stop for somebody driving a stolen vehicle. Ordered the driver, who's the father, out of the car in a manner that you would do so to a criminal or somebody suspected of stealing a car. Then approached the vehicle, two officers with their hands on the guns, and got the rest of the family out of the car on the side of the road, side of 95, which is very busy, obviously, and really basically detained them until it was determined by law enforcement that our clients had not actually stolen this SUV, and actually the problem was that Enterprise had reported it as stolen and then recovered it, but simply not followed their procedures and not reported to law enforcement that it was no longer stolen. So you can only imagine, the nightmare that somebody finds themselves in when they rent a car. They're going about their business. Obviously, they're probably going to be in a state or a city that's unfamiliar to them because they've had to rent a car because they flew in or however they got there. And all of a sudden, they see a police officer following them, or a sheriff following them, and then all of a sudden they find themselves, lights are lit up, the siren goes. Sometimes I've had clients who've been boxed in by multiple vehicles in a felony traffic stop, and all of a sudden, guns are being pointed at them, they're being shouted at, being treated like a criminal. Get out of the car, get out of the car. You want to get out of the car the right way, because if you put your hands a certain way, you might end up getting shot. And so it's a traumatic experience that in no way, shape, or form should ever be occurring. It's not a surprise to rental car companies that this is an issue. I've had them admit to me that, yeah, this is a known issue. It's happened before. It'll happen again. And the first time I heard that, I was kind of shocked because it's such a serious problem and a traumatic incident when it occurs. To hear somebody say that, it's happened before, it'll happen again. So, well, hold on a sec. This is not, going to McDonald's and you order fries, but you don't get the fries. You'll just get them next time. This is not like going to McDonald's and ordering something and not getting it. This is a big deal. This is being, put in a position where you're going to have a law enforcement interaction, and it's probably not going to be very pleasant considering they think you've just stolen a car, and you are the sort of person that steals cars, and you're probably armed and whatever else people that steal cars do. That's what the police are going to expect to encounter this. So they're going to approach the situation with a high level of caution, and that means, force might be used, rightfully or wrongfully, no matter, depending on the situation, what happens. So how can this be prevented? That's the real question. How can this be prevented? Well, it's not rocket science to figure out how to prevent it. It would involve employees being properly trained and following the proper procedures to make sure that whatever cars they provide consumers are not currently reported as stolen. However, you say to yourself, well, how could this happen? If it's as simple as following procedures, why cannot this just be stopped and not occur anymore? Well, the problem is, one, these rental car companies have huge inventories, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of vehicles to track across the United States. It all requires trained employees to manage this process. If I had to guess, I would say that the emphasis is probably not on following procedures, but more so on just getting metal on the road, turning cars over as quickly as possible, and making sure that their inventory is on the road earning them money, as opposed to taking the time to follow procedures specifically to make sure that, okay, let's just see, has this car been reported as stolen? Let's take the time to figure that out. Okay, it looks like it has. Now let's take the time to make sure that it was taken off the stolen list and appropriately, law enforcement was appropriately notified that this car is not. Okay, let's make sure it was off the database, taken off the database. That's what should happen. And if that happens, then 99% of these are not going to occur, and consumers are going to get a car that they don't have to worry about getting pulled over in. And so, what sort of compensation can consumers and their family and anybody else in the car expect when something like this happens? Well, obviously it's significant, it's traumatic. Sometimes people get PTSD from this. They get very worried when they drive thereafter because they're worried about getting pulled over for another bogus reason, because the first time was no fault of their own. There's a tremendous amount of emotional distress. Sometimes the kids get very concerned about driving with their parents because they've been pulled over once for no reason, so now they expect it again. People get scared to have guns pointed at them, which is certainly understandable. And all in all, it's just a traumatic event that really can be avoided, and there's no reason other than negligence for why it continues to occur. So you should know that if this happens to you, the good news is most law enforcement now have body cam and or dash cam. That's available through a Public Information Act or a Freedom of Information Act request. You can also get police reports. And from what I've seen, it's very often that the police officers who pull over consumers and find them in the situation are able to figure out pretty quick and are very familiar with the issue of rental car companies providing their customers with stolen cars. It's a known thing based on my experience and watching body cam videos and doing other investigation. It's a known issue for law enforcement that rental car companies just continue to rent cars to their consumers that are stolen. So you should be aware that if it happens to you, you have many legal rights. Don't let the rental car company pretend that this is not a big deal and offer you a couple $1,000s for your troubles. In my experience, these cases are worth significantly more than that because it's traumatic and it shouldn't happen. And they're on notice. The big rental car companies are on notice that this is a problem. And it appears to me, based on my experience, that they're failing to take the necessary precautions to stop it from happening, probably because it costs time and money that they'd rather spend elsewhere doing something that generates them money as opposed to just costing time and not generating money. So Thank you for watching the video. I hope it's been helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact my office. If this has happened to you, please feel free to contact my office and I'll be happy to see if we're able to help you. Thanks for watching and take care.